Roger, a sturdy man with a background in trucking, had spent years saving to give his wife and 5 daughters a quieter life, away from the noise of the Cumberland. Caroline, artistic and curious, envisioned long days filled with gardening and laughter echoing down the long corridors of the home. Their daughters, Andrea, Nancy, Christine, Cindy, and little April, ran across the fields that first day, their giggles carried by the winter wind. The interior of the home was like something from another century. Exposed wood beams, hand-hewn floorboards worn smooth by the tread of generations. Stained wallpaper curled from the corners like aged parchment. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon, dust, and something else. Something damp and ancient. But there was charm. A fireplace in every room. An enormous dining area that seemed to invite celebration. Tall windows that bathed the rooms in pale morning light. And shadows that stretched just a bit too long. That evening, as dusk followed the horizon and snow began to fall, Caroline stood at the upstairs window, watching her daughters play in the field. Something about the house felt alive. It wasn't just the way the floorboards groaned or the way the wind moaned through the chimney. You'd get the sense that someone was behind you, even when you were alone. That night, April came to Caroline holding an antique music box she'd found upstairs, carved in cherry wood with a cracked porcelain ballerina inside. April said a boy gave it to her, a boy named Rory. He says he lives here too, she added innocently. Caroline smiled, thinking it was an imaginary friend. But April was adamant. Rory had warned her never to go into the closet at the end of the hall, because that's where the bad lady hides. In the days to come, they would all come to understand the terrifying truth. This house wasn't just old, it was haunted, and it wasn't finished collecting souls. At first, it was the little things, the kind of things you chalk up to a tired mind, forgetfulness, or the clumsiness of children. Caroline would sweep the kitchen floor, lean the broom against the wall, and return moments later to find it missing, only to discover it propped neatly in a different room, bristles up instead of down. Cindy, only 8, was the first to say it out loud. One morning she refused to go into the dining room. When she was asked why, she whispered, "Because they're in there, watching us eat." She wouldn't say who they were. She wouldn't look toward the room again. At night, the house came alive. The doors, which creaked softly during the day, groaned and slapped with force once the sun went down. Windows would open on their own, even when latched. The scent of roses would fill the air in one room, only to be replaced by the stench of decaying meat in the next. Clock stopped at precisely 3:07 a.m. every night. Always 3:07. Christine began to hear whispers. At first, she thought it was her sisters, but even when she slept alone, the voices came. They murmured beneath the floorboards, behind the walls, just above her pillow. She couldn't understand the words, but she remembered the tone. One afternoon, Nancy was playing with a dollhouse when she looked up and saw a figure standing at the end of the hallway. It was a woman, tall, thin, her face obscured by the shadows. She didn't move. She just stood there, watching. When Nancy blinked, the woman was gone. But she had left something behind. A deep, frigid cold that made Nancy's breath fog in the air, despite the summer sun pouring through the windows. Then came the dreams. Shared dreams. Christine and Cindy would wake screaming, both having seen the same vision. An old woman with rotting skin, strung up from the ceiling beams, her head lolled sideways, eyes bulging as if she were still choking, still dying, over and over again. The house began to touch them, literally. Andrea described feeling her hair being pulled while brushing her teeth. Caroline swore someone or something tapped on her shoulder one night, only for her to turn around to an empty hallway. Another time, she felt the unmistakable sensation of lips against her ear, cold, breathless, and then a whisper. "Leave now." But they didn't leave, because what the parents didn't know was this house wasn't just haunted, it was intelligent. It knew how to play the long game. It studied them, it picked favorites, and it was just getting started. Caroline. She began waking up with bruises, deep purple fingerprints on her arms, her legs, even her neck. Roger, always practical, blamed the old mattress. But Caroline knew the truth. Something was touching her at night and continuing to watch her during the day. One sunny afternoon, Nancy and Cindy were playing hide and seek. She finally found Nancy, trembling in a closet, her face pale, tears dropping down from her cheeks. Cindy asked what was wrong. Nancy said she'd hidden in the wardrobe upstairs, but the door wouldn't open. Something had held it shut. In the darkness, she heard breathing, not her own, right beside her ear. One evening, as the family prepared dinner, Caroline felt a stabbing pain in her side. She turned to look and saw nothing. But when she lifted her shirt, 3 long scratches, fresh and red, marked her ribs. No blood, just the sting. She would find herself standing in rooms with no memory of how she got there. Sometimes with objects in her hands, old photographs, rusted tools, dried flowers, and always the scent of rot lingering in the air. Her reflection would twitch when she didn't, smile when she wasn't smiling. And once, just once, her eyes turned black in the mirror for a split second. No whites, just black. The darkness wasn't waiting for nightfall anymore. It had made its nest in the daylight. And the house, it was no longer just haunted, it was possessed. One afternoon, while researching the property's history at the local library, Caroline stumbled upon an old map of Harrisville. It showed that the land surrounding their home had once belonged to the Sherman family, stretching back to the early 1800s. She dug deeper. What she found was horrifying. According to legend, Bathsheba was accused of sacrificing her infant son, plunging a sewing needle into the base of his skull as an offering to the devil. Though she stood trial, she was never convicted. Instead, she was shunned, ostracized by the village, despised, hated. She lived the rest of her days in seclusion, growing bitter, unstable, until one morning her body was found hanging from a tree behind the farmhouse, her neck broken, but her eyes still open, still staring, as if watching and waiting. But before she died, Bathsheba cursed the land. "Whosoever takes from me what is mine shall rot in flesh and soul." And now, more than a century later, Caroline had done just that. She had taken her house, her home, her altar. That same night, Caroline woke up at 3:07 a.m., the witching hour. Her body frozen, her eyes open but unable to move. A shadow loomed above her, a black silhouette with clawed hands and eyes like burning coal. It hissed a single word. Roger found her hours later, collapsed on the floor, blood seeping from a small puncture behind her ear, the same mark made on Bathsheba's infant victim. The children were next. Little April began drawing pictures, not flowers or dolls or sunshine, but of women hanging from trees, black-eyed figures standing above her heads, and always of her mother, surrounded by fire. And Bathsheba was preparing to finish what she'd started in blood over a century ago. Caroline's condition only worsened. She would black out for hours. Roger would find her in the attic, standing perfectly still, staring at the wall. Sometimes her hands were cut and bleeding, fingernails broken as if she'd been clawing at something. Sometimes, she spoke in voices that weren't hers. One night, Andrea woke to screams echoing from the master bedroom. She ran in and found her mother levitating, arms outstretched, her body arcing unnaturally in the air. Roger tried to grab her, to pull her down, but something invisible threw him back against the wall with a force no human could manage. Then, Bathsheba finally revealed herself. It was Andrea who saw her first. Late one night, while everyone else slept, Andrea stayed awake, journaling by candlelight. The flame flickered, dimmed, and died. But the room didn't fall into darkness. It glowed, with a thick, greenish light. And standing at the foot of her bed was the witch. Her skin was cracked like old leather, eyes hollow and burning with hate. Her head tilted at the grotesque angle, neck broken. Her mouth open and flies poured out. Andrea screamed. The witch didn't move. She just watched, smiling. From that night on, Bathsheba wasn't hiding anymore. The girl saw her in mirrors, in reflections, at the end of the hallway. Once, Cindy tried to close the bathroom door and found that it wouldn't budge. She forced it open and saw the witch in the mirror, standing behind her, smiling. The Perrons called in 2 people, the only ones who might stand a chance against Bathsheba Sherman, the only ones brave or foolish enough to walk into that house and face the evil within. Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Warrens entered the home. The air was thick, oppressive, like the weight of sorrow and rage had soaked into the very walls. Lorraine immediately sensed layers of spirits. She said it felt like being in the presence of a rotting god. Ed began setting up recording devices, crucifixes, and relics. Lorraine walked the rooms in silence. When she entered the master bedroom, she stopped. Her voice dropped to a whisper. She's strongest here. This is where she touches her. This is where she waits. Over the next few days, the Warrens conducted their investigation. What they uncovered was terrifying. The land the farmhouse stood on had a long, blood-soaked history. 8 generations of deaths, suicides, hangings, poisonings, and drownings. Children buried in unmarked graves. And at the center of it all was Bathsheba. Lorraine learned that Bathsheba wasn't just a rumor. She had been a real woman, and she had dedicated herself to Satan. She had sacrificed her child, cursed the land, and upon death, fused her spirit with it. She hadn't moved on. The Perron family had unknowingly become part of our ritual, and Caroline was the final offering, the vessel. Lorraine saw visions. Caroline with black eyes tied to the cellar floor, speaking in a voice not her own. She saw Bathsheba standing over her, mouth open in triumph, arms raised in sacrifice. During a seance conducted in the basement, Lorraine made direct contact. The candles blew out, the temperature dropped, and then Caroline screamed. Her chair levitated and flew across the room, slamming into a wall. Her body contorted, shoulders cracking, her back arched to the unnatural degrees. Lorraine collapsed. When she came to, she cried. Not from fear, but from what she saw. She said Bathsheba had rooted herself inside Caroline like a disease. She wasn't just possessing her, she was replacing her. The Warrens knew that when they were no longer simply observers, they were part of the story now. And if they didn't act quickly, the next time Bathsheba took over, she wouldn't be giving Caroline back. The Warrens had tried every method: blessings, cleansings, holy water, Nothing drove Bathsheba out. The spirit was feeding off of the chaos, thriving on Caroline's fear and the family's pain. They were running out of time. And then one night, Caroline vanished. The wind screamed through the trees like the house itself was howling. Roger called for Caroline. No answer. They searched every room, empty. And then Ed heard it. A soft banging from the cellar. They rushed to the basement. Roger, Ed, Lorraine, Father Gordon, and 2 investigators from the Warren team. When they pulled open the old wooden door, the stench hit them. Decay, rot, sulfur, and down there, in the far corner of the dark, stone basement, sat Caroline. She wasn't alone. Her eyes were black, her skin ashen. Her mouth moved, but the voice that came out was not hers. It was Bathsheba's, low, cruel, ancient. "She's mine." The lights burst. The walls seemed to shake. Lorraine began the exorcism, not a Catholic one, but a spiritual banishment. She held her rosary high and chanting Latin through trembling lips. Caroline screamed. Her body lifted from the ground, arms outstretched like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. She slammed into the ceiling, then the wall, then the floor, over and over. Roger cried out, but Ed held him back. Suddenly, the investigators were thrown back by an invisible force. One man began convulsing, his eyes rolled back in his head. The cross around Lorraine's neck snapped and flew into the darkness, but she kept chanting. Lorraine's voice grew louder. Ed joined her. Father Gordon raised his hands and shouted the name of Christ, and for a split second, time froze. Caroline's body hung in the air, twisted and limp, and from her mouth, Bathsheba screamed. A darkness erupted from Caroline's mouth, black smoke, thick and oily, rising like a spirit being torn from flesh. It hissed, and then silence. Caroline collapsed into Roger's arm, her body limp, her skin slick with sweat, but her eyes were her home. Bathsheba was gone, banished, but not destroyed. Lorraine would later say, "Evil like that doesn't die. It waits." The house grew quiet after that. Not empty, not healed, but still, like a beast had returned to its cave to sleep. The Perron family never moved out, not immediately. They stayed for years. And though the hauntings grew less frequent, the memory of that night would live in their bones forever. Some houses are never just wood and stone. Some carry echoes of violence, of sorrow, of rage, and some are marked by something far older and far darker. The Perron house was one of those places, a place where a mother nearly became a monster, where a witch still whispers from the shadows, where the line between life and death blurred forever.